From the misty Pacific coast to the rugged Cascade Mountains and beyond to the high desert in the east. Whether you chase black-tailed or mule deer, Roosevelts or Rockies, if you fish for bass or salmon, hunt cougars, bears, turkeys, or ducks, we want to talk about the most overlooked section of the outdoorsman community, true Pacific Northwest hunters and fishermen. You have found the podcast for you. Born in the wettest woods of the lower 48, where we only talk about the endless pursuits of the far western world to inspire you in your next adventure.
There will be many tags in our lives that go unfilled, but if your first objective is to learn and grow, you can find success in every season.
And I stand up and like, oh my God,
Your foot fell off.
it's off. Can't find it.
And ask the big questions about what truly motivates our life in the wild.
I believe that God gave us the ability to do this.
You go from plodding along and not really living to living the full, abundant life that He has for you now.
You are listening to the Oregon First Hunting and Fishing Podcast.
Welcome to the Salem First Hunting and Fishing Podcast, where we want to talk about local outdoor news, experiences, current events, and really dig into our identity as hunters and fishers in the Pacific Northwest. More specifically, here in Salem, Oregon, Willamette Valley. We're in the center of it all, right, Eric?
Yeah, we're pretty much smack dab right in the middle of the I-5 corridor. So we have, the coast, we have the mountain ranges going up over into the Cascades. Just a lot of great fishing and hunting around here. But, I'm the fishing guy, obviously. Bryant's the hunter.
Yep, I'm more of the hunter. And we have quite a few exciting things going on between turkey season just started up, spring bear, springers in the river. That would be chinook salmon. And, just all kinds of bass are starting to wake up.
Yep.
So that's pretty exciting. Eric is a huge bass guy.
Yeah, a little bit.
And our guest today, coming from Badash Outdoors, we have Ashley Lewis. Ashley, thanks for being on.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
So just to introduce our guest real quick, Ashley grew up in Washington State. Is that right?
That's right. Western Washington. Shout out to Olympia.
All right, Olympia. So growing up out there, what was your upbringing like?
So I was actually born in Aberdeen, Washington. And if you've ever drove out to the coast in Washington, you probably drove through the area that I was born and spent the first few years of my life. And Grays Harbor is just an interesting kind of town. It's very different than Olympia, very different than Seattle. Yeah, I don't even know how to explain Aberdeen. But my upbringing was super humble, to be honest with you. My mother worked at a wood mill, a Simpson Door Company in McClary, and my father also worked at the door mill. And then later on, my stepfather also worked at the door. Everyone worked for the wood mill in town. And so very much working class family. And so in the area that I grew up, you do one of two things. You get in trouble or you go fishing. And I picked fishing.
Good choice. Yeah.
Yes. So
I wish more people would make that choice.
It's right. And so to me, that was an activity that I could really sink myself into. I've always been an outdoors kid. Anytime I'm happy, I want to go play outside. When I'm sad, I want to go and trot around in the woods. And when I want to, share experiences with people, I want to take them outside to do something. And so that's kind of the way that awesome. I grew up. And, family vacations weren't to Hawaii or anything like that. Our family vacations were to Rainbow Falls campgrounds and
nice.
places where you're going to go trout fishing or something like that. So that's how I was raised.
Cool.
That sounds like the Pacific Northwest lifestyle right there.
Yes,
I love it. And
absolutely.
So, we're excited. So this is episode number 2, and it's so funny that the whole premise of this podcast is supposed to be Pacific Northwest, even down to Willamette Valley specific. But our last guest came to us from Missouri. So, and so here we are, Washington now. We're narrowing it in, right?
Yeah.
We're hitting the bullseye, but we're glad to have another PNW lover on the show. So you mentioned that you're a fishing guide.
Yeah, so that was started. Wow, this is such a ridiculous story for how this started. So for one, for a little bit of context, I'm a 142nd generation angler. So I'm a member of the Quinault Indian Nation, and my family, my ancestors, have lived on the Washington coast and fished for salmon and lived with salmon for a millennia.
Wow.
So in addition to being raised and growing up playing outside, there is a very deep connection that my family has with fishing for salmon specifically and steelhead. So I think that desire to go salmon fishing has always been there. But the way that it turned into guiding is, as one does, goes to beauty school in my early 20s when I'm trying to figure out like who I am.
Okay.
And so I was like, I'm going to be a hairstylist and I'm going to do makeup. And like, and honestly, I really loved it. I enjoyed it. Doesn't pay the bills very well. And so I was fishing a ton at the time. And one of my peers, one of my tribal peers, encouraged me to get into fishing, like as guiding. And I thought, I'll run a few trips here and there just to bring in a little bit of side money. And that's what I'll do. And then I decided I don't really like the beauty industry. It was fun for a minute. I'm growing out of it like really quickly. And I've spent enough time fishing to like really fall in love with the sport, but also fall in love with the idea of continuity and seeing fishing being available for, people past our generation. And it is a very like deep value to salmon people, indigenous salmon people. We want to see this for our futures too. And so I decided I'm going to go back to school. So I enrolled at the University of Washington in American Indian Studies, first in aquatic fisheries science, but I'm less interested in science and more interested in storytelling. So I switched majors. And then I ramped up the guiding to pay for school books.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I made a Facebook page about my fishing. It was called before it was Badass Outdoors, it was Quinault Sport Angling.
Nice. That's really searchable.
Yeah, exactly. Searchable, right down the middle of the road. We're not going to fluster anybody with this name. Like, we know what this is about from the name. And I started fishing, and I think social media, the people that I was people that found my page and were like exposed to my fishing content, I think they saw something unique and different. Here is an indigenous woman that is, really interested in the future of salmon. And I'm supporting that idea by fishing for salmon and taking people out on the Quinault Indian Reservation and showing them an experience that you can't really find anywhere else. So long story longer, beauty school, undergraduate, social media, like these are the things that have like given rise to what my fishing guiding career was like.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting. And to hear your unique culture that kind of brought it all together, that's really cool.
Yeah. I think I really discovered my identity as an indigenous, because we all you go through this like identity crisis as a teenager. Who am I? Who do I want to be? And then you get into your 20s and you start kind of like solidifying that, like, okay, like I've tried some things out, like really, who am I? And through salmon fishing alongside Quinault fishers on the Quinault and Queets rivers, I really came into my identity as an indigenous woman, and that ignited some purpose for me that has really been the through thread of my experience up until now. So yeah, that has been my culture. My role as an indigenous woman has become like deeply meaningful and profound to me.
I love that. That's awesome.
So did you grow up subsistence fishing and hunting, or were you just strictly, fishing the fisheries when they were available and open?
I think it was a little bit of like more sport recreation at first, but there was also, so Quinault people, salmon is a staple in our diets, but so was like wild game, and so are razor clams. Clams are a big part of that. And so the subsistence part really came in there. I genuinely thought that everyone's family went clam digging every clam tide and had clams, like razor clams for dinner, like 2 or 3 times a week. I thought everybody did that. And so you can imagine, 4th grade, you're going over and staying the night at people's houses, and it's like, why don't they ever have clams for dinner? Like, that's terrible. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't dig very well. Like, I don't know. But I think it was once I grew up and I realized that, like, no, that was very much a way of life. And that was the subsistence piece that my family was deeply engaged with, which sounds like romantic and everything, but really like going clam digging with my mother, who taught me fishing and clam digging. It was about the love, but it was more about the limits. The more kids you have with little sacks, the more limits that you have. So it was, it was subsistence. It was a way of life. It was for the love, but it was really for the limits. And that was the subsistence piece for me.
Yeah.
I like it.
Real quick to backtrack, when you were talking about your name, Bad Ash Outdoors. So my last name is Ashton.
Nice.
And so I totally get my wife and I, our Wi-Fi password is Kiss My Ashton. You know, there's just so many fun things. When I was growing up in high school, you know, you get ashtray, ash hole.
Oh yeah.
You know, Bad Ash Outdoors. Way to embrace it. That's great.
Yeah, thanks. I had a knack for wrecking my ATV as a teenager. I loved ATV riding, and I came to school often with bandages and stitches and stuff like that. So Crashly was the original nickname before Bad Ash.
Okay. Hey, that's a pretty nice one though, you know.
Right. There's worse,
like
right?
it.
There's worse versions of Ash.
Yep. So you also have found a lot of success social media wise, especially we're seeing Instagram, a lot of followers, YouTube, you have a lot of engagement. Could you say again, when did that kind of come into play?
Yeah, so here's the thing about being a fishing guide. You'll have experiences that aren't replicable in any other format. You go out with people, they want this experience. You're curating an experience with a resource that is sometimes unpredictable. So there's always this sense of like, are we going to catch them? Are we not going to catch them? What is the weather going to do to me today? But every single time, without fail, there's this adventure aspect to it. But the thing with fish guiding is you can only take so many people, and there are only so many fishable days in a year. And I loved what I was doing so much, and I was entirely capped out for how many days I could fish and how many people I could fish. And so I felt like, I love this. This has given me some experience and some chops, really, that I needed to go forward with my career. But there was a sense very early on for me that this is great, but it's not going to be enough, and I need to evolve this. And so I loved the idea of sharing my world with other people. I think that's best experienced when you're sitting, you know, behind me in the rower seat or in front of me on the rower seat. But the next best thing outside of that is for me to, like, through video, through storytelling, through another medium, to bring more people along with me. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted to, like, share my experience with more than 3 anglers per day. And so, I mean, at first, the social media is just a way of like, hey, look, if you like were to scroll back like really far on my Instagram feed or on my Facebook feed, you would see every post is like limits, caught another limit today, book me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Seats open.
Yeah, exactly. And then it kind of morphed into like, here's how I did this. And here's what was so great about today's experience. And let me introduce you to the so-and-so who caught their first fish or their first salmon ever, and how it was, you know, a profoundly life-changing experience for them. So telling that story, I chose social media to do that. And I think, again, that really resonated with people because I'm of the mindset of abundance, not scarcity. I want to tell all the secrets. I don't care about the secrets. I want to tell all of the methods. I want to share all of the experiences. I want to share all of the knowledge because I truly believe this, you guys. When we get people involved in what we are doing, like we, the royal we, like us 3, and then like all of our listeners, what we are doing, when we get somebody involved in that, they start caring about it in a really profound way. And that's what gets me out of bed every morning, is the idea that we create advocacy, that we ensure the future of what we are doing, our livelihoods, but the fish swimming in the river, the animals running around in the woods, the clams digging their holes out in the beach. We ensure the future of that through participation, because when people are there, that's when they start caring about it.
Yeah, I love that shift from, talking about limits and went out, caught fish, we got the resource, but then switching that to loving the resource and showing people what is really behind, because to people who aren't involved in the outdoor space at all, what do they see? They see whack 'em and stack 'em, they see just, it's all about killing and getting meat and filling tags, but there's something underneath of all that that's deeply important to us in our identity as outdoorsmen and women, and especially for you and your culture and the family line that you come out of, but even for someone like me who just loves the outdoors and loves engaging with that and wanting to put the best image out there for the non-hunters and the non-fishermen to see that, there's more to us. We're not just here to kill things. We're here to love the resource and to be connected with where our food comes from. So really love that you're doing that.
I love how you said that. And one thing that you said, I think, is like really important to like tease out a little bit. And that's the identity piece, is it becomes like a very part of who you are. Who you are as a person is connected with these salmon runs. These, you're a big game hunter. It becomes connected in those habitats. Like you become a part of an ecosystem the moment you position yourself as an angler or as a hunter. And I think that like there's an identity thing that's very real there. And I love how you said that.
Awesome. Well, I think that was a good introduction for you, Ashley. We're going to talk a bit more in depth on a few of those things later on in the show, but we have a couple other portions to take care of. First of all, we have an announcement. Eric, you want to let people know what we have coming up at the end of the month?
Sure. So April, the end of the month. 29th. I was like, I always want to say the 28th.
29th.
The 29th.
29th.
We are having a fishing derby. We're going to have a small little tournament. It's on a local pond here. It's just going to be bass species only. We're going to have some door prizes for biggest fish of the day, most weight of the day. So anyway, we're giving away a rod reel combo, some bait, some hooks. I mean, we're going to have a mystery tackle box to give away as well.
Yeah, we bought one of those bigger ones.
Nice.
Ashley, do you do the mystery tackle box ever?
I have never done it, but the whole idea of like, you're going to get some fishing stuff. And it's a mystery. You don't know exactly what it's going to be, but you still know it's fishing stuff. You're going to be happy with it. I love that idea.
Yeah, Eric and I have been so tempted to open that thing and see what's inside, but we're going to save that for whoever wins it. It'll be a surprise.
You're better people than me. I would totally open it and lie.
I've been keeping my eye on Eric. It's in his office, so I'm like, come on, dude, leave that thing alone. But Eric, you left out the most important part. It's free.
It is free. We're going to serve lunch. Yeah, it's not going to cost anybody anything to come out and enjoy a day of fishing with us. So don't feel like you also need to own a bunch of gear to come out. We do have some that we're willing to lend to people that need to have that. I think for Bryant and I, we're going to be doing a lot of running around while everybody else is having fun, but excited. And we're going to try and make it an annual thing. So hopefully it'll get bigger every year.
Yep. So this year it's on a private pond with a lot of really good largemouth. We've been promised that there'll be some big boys out there. So find us on our Facebook page, Salem First Hunting and Fishing Club, to sign up. We have an event set up there. You can click interested if you're interested, and we'll reach out to you with details because we don't want to just blast where this private pond is.
Exactly.
You know how it is.
It's one of those day of things we're going to release.
Yep.
So
be ready for that. Spring Fishing Trip 2023. So one thing that we'll do on this show every single episode is talk to keep Eric and I accountable to our passion for the outdoors. Is we're going to talk about something outdoors related that we've been doing this week. For me, I went on my first turkey hunt. You buy the sports pack. Here in Oregon, we have the sports pack. It comes with every tag in the state. It's, deer, elk, all the normal stuff.
Yeah.
Bear, cougar, and turkey. So usually I just let that turkey tag go to waste. But this year I got real excited actually about trying to figure out those things and how to hunt them. I only have access to public land. So this has been a pretty cool adventure. Anyway, I went out scouting last week and I found a hen all by herself. And I was blown away because I've spent a lot of time in the woods and I've never seen a turkey out there. It's just like when I go looking for them, I find them. I was pretty blown away that happened. Maybe it's because of the time of year I'm out there, but found a bunch of turkey droppings, practice calling, got a cheap decoy. I was all ready to go. Hiked out there. It's about 3 miles to the spot, kind of in the foothills, only about 1,000 feet, really low, tucked behind some private fields in a public area. And it's got about 2 inches of snow.
Oh, wow.
Did not expect that. Yeah. That was a surprise. I was not dressed for snow at all.
Sure.
And I don't think the turkeys were either because they didn't have anything to say about it. Didn't see a bird. I sat there for a couple hours and then I began to walk and look for tracks because I thought, oh, you know what? Snow, maybe I'll see some tracks. I mean, I found plenty of deer, but I didn't find any turkey. I checked my map. I walked 10 miles that day, which is a lot more than I usually walk or would expect to walk on a turkey hunt. But, I found a couple of great places. I'm going to go set up again when it's not snowing and see if I can make something happen. But that was my week in the turkey woods.
That's so cool that you saw a hen, though. Like, sometimes when you come out, you're doing something new. And, like, even if it's, like, not the intended, like, target you've found, you're like, I really did find it. It worked. It kind of worked.
Yeah,
I found a turkey.
There's living creatures. It's not just trees and bugs.
Right.
And squirrels. There's actual things.
They do exist.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah, I know. I didn't believe it because, like I said, I've been hunting for years and spent a lot of time in the woods, and I've never seen a turkey out there. I've seen plenty of them in the farmers' fields, but yeah, it was a cool experience.
Well, and then for me, I'm getting ready for the upcoming bass season. So spawn's going to be here pretty soon. I'm just trying to figure out which events I'm going to fish or have time to fish. Definitely probably going to fish the Pro-Am this year. That should be fun. That's nice. That's on the Columbia.
Whose boat you going to bum?
I don't know. I'm going to have to bum my way onto a boat.
Yep. So give a buddy a call.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I was noticing that you and I have some mutual friends, and they're people that are on the Shimano G. Loomis team.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your sponsorships and your corporate deals and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I love that you brought up Shimano. Shimano was my first fishing family. And I almost get emotional anytime I talk about Shimano because they were the first major rod reel sponsorship that I had. And really, really saw the value in what I was doing. They didn't treat me and honestly, I've been on some pro staff situations where it's we brought you on because you're a girl and you fish, and that's exciting to us. Yeah. This was not that
token woman.
Yes, exactly. And this is not what that was at all for them. They saw the value in what I was doing. They saw that I was at the top of my game, and they really wanted to invest in what I was doing. So they, of course sponsored me, but they also brought me out to lots of different events. So the first time I ever worked the Pacific Northwest sports shows was on the behalf of Shimano. I went to ICAST in Orlando on the behalf of Shimano, and really got connected with the outdoor industry nationally through Shimano. I've made some of my best friends through Shimano. I've had really incredible fishing experiences through them, and they never once treated me differently because I was a woman angler. They expected excellence all of the time. And shout out to Blaine Anderson and the rest of the Shimano team. They're still I have the utmost respect for that group of people. And phenomenal products, as well. And I absolutely love them. I did end up moving over to pure fishing. I had a show in the Northwest for a hot second, and a very hot second.
Okay.
And it was called Breakout with Bad Ash. And Pure Fishing ended up being a big sponsor to that. And Pure Fishing has also been so supportive of me. I love that for someone who wants to get people involved with fishing, taking them to Pure Fishing products. So Berkeley Abu Garcia, Ugly Stick, Pen Fishing. A lot of these things are way more approachable in terms of price for folks. And they offer fantastic products, and a huge range of products. So it was really great to work with them. But I've been really fortunate to have some really incredible sponsors over the years. Right now, the love of my life is my kayak. I named him Tom Cruise.
Nice.
Because he is an electric. I have a Minn Kota motor in it, so he cruises. So my Tom Cruise is the love of my life. And Johnson Outdoors and the watercraft team has just been I've been very fortunate with all of these groups to have people that really believe in me, support what I'm doing, and see a really cool future together. So some of those folks have been fantastic, but I'm glad that we have that in common, that you, the Shimano thread in common. That's really cool.
Yeah. My buddy, Ryan Sparks, he's been on the Shimano team for a couple years
Yeah,
now.
I worked with Ryan at the sports shows, the Pacific Northwest sports shows. I love Ryan. Ryan is so wonderful.
He's a good dude. Our families are basically from the same town. My cousin dated his sister, and they all went to high school together and stuff. So then
Up in Alaska?
In Alaska.
Or Corvallis? Oh, Alaska.
Haines, Alaska.
Up in Alaska. Cool.
Yeah. So we go back quite a few years, our families. Turns out when Ryan came down to Oregon State, he got on their fishing team. Well, he needed a boat, and I don't know if my dad sold it to him or gave it to him, but ended up giving my duck boat to Ryan so Ryan could fish. Like, oh, you don't need this. But
That's funny.
And look at where you are now, Eric.
I know, right?
And look at where Ryan is.
Yeah. No,
It was
like
the boat.
Yeah, he's been
It
able
was
to
the
make
boat.
a living, within the fishing industry.
Awesome. Eric, real quick, getting back to talking about your upcoming bass season, you wanted to shout out a couple lures that you're looking forward to fishing?
Oh, yeah. So kind of lately I've been nerding out a lot on Japanese stuff. So Mega Bass, Lucky Craft, and this right here that I have in my hand is a sleeper gill made by Mega Bass. This is
Ooh.
a 3/4 ounce sleeper gill. This is going to be a hot little lure this year.
That looks good.
The guys, yeah, I know. And what's great about it is
Yeah.
the weed guard is actually a top fin, and then it's got these little pectoral balancers down here. So it should be pretty sweet movement in the water.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see this. Going to be the first one I try. The second one that I want to talk about today is Mike Buca's bull shad.
Ooh.
I don't know if you've seen Buca's stuff. His swim baits are legit. We pulled it out of the package while we were sitting here waiting to talk to you, and
We're playing with it.
Nice.
it's got sharp hooks.
Yep.
It's got a really, really sweet movement to it. It's 4 serrations, so it's going to be, you can fish it fast, you can fish it slow, but this one in particular is a 3 3/4 inch length, and it's a slow sinking. So
Yeah, and it's an articulated shad, right?
yep. Articulated shad. So that's going to be a cool one to try out. I'm really excited to have one of those in my tackle box this year. Third one, and anybody that knows me knows that I love to fish a lipless crankbait. So I got a Janko here, and this one's the Rip Knocker.
I
Super
love that
pretty.
color.
Yeah, it's kind of an iridescent. It's got a little bit of purple, a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow, blue, black. So it looks like it's going to be a pretty hot spawn lure. So I'm really excited to try this.
So it's called the lip knocker. Ashley, we were talking before the show. Have you ever heard of a lure called a dock knocker?
A dock knocker?
We were thinking of making our own lure and calling it the dock knocker.
Is that the one where you cast and nail the dock instead of getting it in the water?
Yep. And then I started thinking, well, maybe Eric should just change his fishing account handle to Dock Knocker, and you can be the Dock Knocker.
I think that would be an
That's
incredible handle. I would follow anyone that has that kind of humility about their fishing situation.
Yeah,
I was going to change it to the Rod Father just because I have so many
that's
rods.
a good one, but it might be taken.
But yeah,
The Rod
if
Father,
it's
the
not
Dock
taken,
Knocker.
Yeah, you gotta be the Dock Knocker.
I'll change it.
And
I'll
then
see.
I was also thinking, if you are one who tends to ride your boat up too quick when you're coming in for a landing, you could also be the Dock Knocker in that regard.
I've done that a few times.
So moving on now to talk about a local news story. Some really big news in the smelt fishing world.
Yeah.
Here in Oregon on the Sandy River. We had our first smelt fishing season open for the first time since 2015. And here's the thing. It was March 30th, which is a Thursday in the middle of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only open from noon to 7 p.m.
Shorter than a work shift.
Yeah, exactly. Take that day off.
And it was dip net only.
Yeah, dip net only.
Yeah.
So then I started thinking, if you have work, if you don't have a dip net, you're out of luck. But I guess it didn't matter because there was thousands of people. The banks were just lined with people with dip nets going after those smelt. It was all the way from the mouth up to Stark Street Bridge. So quite a large portion of the Sandy River.
Oh, that is a good portion of the Sandy River. Did it seem like people had a lot of success doing that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
It was a 10-pound limit, which they said was, how did they say it? Half of a 5-gallon bucket is approximately 10 pounds?
I think it was half of a 5-gallon freezer bag.
Oh, freezer bag. Oh, okay.
I think is what it was.
Okay.
Should be around 10 pounds.
Wow. Well, I've never even seen a 5-pound freezer bag. That's impressive.
5-gallon?
So, 5-gallon. So you need a 5-gallon freezer bag, a dip net, and a day off of work so far.
Yeah.
So we're up in the ante here.
Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah, and there was no tag or no reporting or anything. All that you did was get your fishing license and you were clear. Of course, I don't know. I'm curious how they would have managed that 7 p.m. shutdown. How many enforcement officers did they have out there, I wonder? We thought smelt were kind of interesting. Like, I had never really thought about them before. They're just kind of an oily bait fish, but people like to eat them still. They fry them whole is a popular way to eat them. But Eric, you kind of looked up a few things about how long they live and what they do.
Yeah, so basically they spawn in our river systems, and as they get bigger and migrate out towards the ocean, they have a general life expectancy of about 7 years. And that's really dependent.
Like at the top, right?
Right. And that's kind of dependent upon how fast or how quickly or how safely they get out to the ocean. They do have kind of a longer life cycle for fish, which is kind of cool. I mean, I was kind of expecting 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there. But to hear 7+, I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing.
I could imagine. I mean, it said they're only like 5 inches long.
Yeah, they kind of vary in size, between 3.5 to 5-6 inches.
So it sounds to me like a perfect little bait fish. Yeah. And yeah, like you said, they're anadromous, so they go out to the ocean to feed and grow, and they kind of look like a sardine to me.
Yeah.
Ashley, being part of the Quinault tribe, have you ever dip netted?
I have not dip netted. A lot of my family and friends have done it. So generally, Quinaults either are crab fishers, so there's like a commercial crab operation, or gill netters. And so they have gill nets on the Quinault River, sometimes on the Queets River, that sort of thing. When I was a kid, we did we would jig for herring, but when the herring would come in off the coast. But I've never done any sort of dipping of anything, but I would be totally down to dip for some food fish.
Yeah, dip for some smelt.
Yeah.
And the herring, they get bigger than a smelt, don't they?
They can, yeah.
It was just a huge, massive run, many times bigger than the previous years. I guess they just assumed that there was enough of them to open a season, because I don't know how you even count them.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That's your local hunting and fishing news. The smelt, which were once listed as threatened, have come back in record-breaking numbers. So really cool there. To anyone who got to participate in that, let us know how it was, and maybe they'll open up again next year if we have another good run. I guess it's time we get into our interview with Ashley, with Bad Ash Outdoors, I should say. So we have 5 icebreaker questions that we want to ask you, and these are pretty quick, rapid fire. If you want to elaborate, go ahead. One word answers is also fine.
Okay. Whew.
I already know the answer to this first question, but first one, mono or fluorocarbon?
Fluoro.
Right.
This shouldn't be a question in anyone's mind, and if anyone thinks differently, they are wrong, and I will fight you in the streets if you think something differently.
All right, when and where?
I like it.
Oh, mono guy.
Yeah, that was a topic of discussion last episode, because I've just always used mono and I'm just content with it. But I also don't really use a bait caster that often, so that might be why.
Yeah.
Which goes to our next question.
Bait caster or spinning?
Bait caster.
Nice.
How dare you? No, there's a time and a place for both. I will say the majority of the time I'm using a bait caster. There are a few, like float fishing. There's certain situations where I do like a spinning rod, or like some like finesse sort of like bass gear, like I will really like a spinning rod for that. So for finesse gear, I'm generally going a spinning reel and then bait caster for like literally anything else.
So do you ever break out the old close face Zebco?
Yes, I do.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
You know, like I love this industry. Boy, people get really into their gear, so it's like it's humbling.
Oh, yeah.
Like let's give. I know that everyone started with the Zebco. I don't care how into it you are. I don't care how long you've been fishing or how amazing your career is. You need to stay true to the Zebco. And if you don't,
get back to your roots.
Right, your 8-year-old self is going to kick your butt all the way down the dock. Respect the Zebco.
Zebco and a night crawler.
Exactly.
How's that? Back to your roots.
Yep.
All right. Fishing or hunting?
Oh, fishing. Oh, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard because elk season's coming up in the peninsula, and like, boy, as soon as that comes, I'm like, oh, I'm really excited for it. But fishing is at the center of my heart.
Yeah, it's got you to where you are today, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think like I'm more comfortable as an angler than I am as a hunter. Like I'm a decent hunter. I'm a good angler, and I'm just like a mediocre hunter. I'm dangerous enough.
So with that being said, do you hunt with a bow or a rifle?
I hunt with a rifle. I have so much appreciation and respect for bow hunting, and I know that if I did it, I would absolutely love it. And I've been lying to myself for years saying, I'm going to try it this year. Oh, I'm going to start practicing this year. And I also say that about the piano. I'm going to pick up the piano again. I also say that about learning Spanish. I'm going to it's somewhere in the queue of things that I'm going to do. It's just, boy, it's not time.
All right. It brings us to our last question. Kayak or boat?
Ooh, boy. There are different stages of my life. The last chapter of Ashley would have said a boat. This chapter of Ashley says a kayak. And
Tom Cruise.
Yeah, Tom Cruise. Like, I love him. No, oh gosh, boy, this is so hard. Oh, wow. Why do I feel like I feel like my blood pressure rising, feeling like I have to like make a choice. Boating has been most of my life. Rafting really has been a big part of that too. I love running raft trips, fishing raft trips. But there is something really special. And I think once I stopped guiding, and I think I'm going to come back to I'll mention that maybe later. But while I'm fishing and not guiding, there is a certain autonomy that comes with kayaking, and there's a certain access that comes with kayaking that has opened up my world to so many more fisheries. And like going out on the ocean in a kayak, like just brings a perspective of like life and like an ecosystem that like feels really, really cool from a kayak. So I'm going to go kayak for now.
Cool.
I've never had the opportunity to use one of the decked out, fishing kayaks with the pedestal seat, and I guess it's not a full on, you know what I'm saying? Those
yes.
My buddy had one, and I just have a bright orange sit inside kayak.
Love it.
That I also use just for everything. It's had 2 dead deer on it.
That is awesome.
Yeah. It's had a handful of fish as well. But yeah, I've always been intrigued by that world. Instead, I have a John boat, so there you go.
When I come back up to the Northwest, which will be soon, we should go kayak fishing. I have a couple of kayaks. The 3 of us should go, and you should experience it. Yeah, it's so cool.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. I'm all for it.
So speaking of boats, when we were kind of researching Ashley, and we were talking about the one boat challenge earlier, tell us a little bit about that, because when I was doing the research on that, it was down in Mexico.
Yeah.
And I noticed that they had to long line the bass boats into the lake.
Yeah, from a helicopter.
Oh boy, I don't even know where to start with this experience. The one boat challenge was maybe one of my favorite experiences in life up until this point.
Wow.
Oof, gosh, there's a handful that are right up there with like my favorite experiences in life. So I went, really the El Salto, and that's the lake that we're on in Mexico, is Lake El Salto. That started really with a sword fishing trip in Florida. Oh. And so I went, after I cast, I was working with Gerber knives at the time. And some of the guys associated with that group, my friends Martin and Andrew, they were like, hey, we're going to go fishing. Let's all go. I jumped in and they're like, hey, so-and-so is going to be there. I'm like, yeah, cool. Let's go fishing. And this group of people ended up, I affectionately call them the wolf pack now, because we left as a bunch of strangers and new friends, and we came back as a pack ready to prowl the world, right?
Nice.
And we had this incredible trip. We caught a 400-pound swordfish together. It was one of the coolest experiences. But that group of people included the brand manager for Humminbird, and works with Minn Kota and some of the folks involved in that team. And so when they were putting together this group of people, and the premise of the show is they're going to take a group of elite anglers that don't fish bass primarily. And there was an NFL player and a snowboarder and another YouTuber and guides that were, not in the bass realm. Dropped everybody off on a lake, and we didn't know anything about what was going on until we got there. So, okay, I'm going to Mexico. I'm not really sure what's going on here. So we get dropped off at El Salto with a Vexus boat decked out with Humminbird, Minn Kota, Talons, the whole one boat network, as they call it. And it was you're going to compete against each other, these elite competitors. Here's the stuff. You get no other information. Go out and go catch some fish now.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was incredible.
And what was the goal? Did they even tell you the goal?
Yeah, so it was a competition. And at the end, the winner gets thousands of dollars to go to an organization of their choice. And so I picked the Brown Folks Fishing Organization, an organization that's trying to get Black, Indigenous, people of color into fishing. That's there. So I wanted to raise money for that group.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And everyone kind of had their own organization that they wanted the money to go to. So if you won, your organization of choice got a great donation to them.
Cool. So
we competed. It was a great time. The helicopter stunt was the coolest thing. So the boat came in and left via helicopter. So the crown piece of the show is you have a helicopter from this dude named Morgan from Idaho. They have a really great helicopter company.
Nice.
Grabs this Vexus boat, beautiful bass boat. Drops it off in the lake, and then we're fishing for the week, and then the boat leaves the lake via helicopter, and it's where is it going to go next? So for the next iteration of the one boat challenge, who knows where the helicopter drops the boat off next? But it was incredible, and would say
and you're not in the boat when it gets dropped off.
Unfortunately, no. I advocated for let's just do it. What could possibly go wrong? But they were no.
This could possibly go wrong.
Some safety guy was going, no.
Yeah, it was so great. And and through that experience, I made friends and solidified friendships that have become some of the most important in my life. And I wouldn't trade that experience for literally anything. I wouldn't trade it for $1 million. I loved every moment of that.
You said that was up there, and it might even be your favorite hunting or fishing story, but do you have another one that you want to share with us?
So I'm going to go back to the sword fishing trip, and I tease the wolf pack, I tease the swordfish, but this is really, I think, there's important things to glean from this fishing trip. So I've given you the context. Post ICAST, which is a really great fishing show. A lot of companies unveil their new products for the year. People get to, go and check that out. It's a great industry event. But after that, I jump in a van with some people I know, some people I don't know. And it is a minivan, just to paint a picture here.
Okay.
And so I'm riding with these folks, and everyone seems really fun, really cool, but we're all just kind of getting to know each other, right? We go out peacock fishing in Florida, in the West Palm Beach area. And that's when you're kind of assessing. You're okay, this guy can fish. And they're all right, this woman, she knows what she's doing. So we're okay. We're assessing and kind of getting, kind of mapping each other in the fishing world, I guess. And then we go out on our friend Seth's boat, and we go out sword fishing. Sword fishing is a group event and kind of a solo. Like the captains are really fishing. You're just the crew that's on the boat while it's all happening, right?
Sure, yeah.
So we go fishing for a bull shark. I catch a bull shark. That was really cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was incredible.
Yeah, that's
but
awesome.
I very distinctly remember the moment. And in sword fishing, you have a bait that's dropped under a big, like, kind of like buoy with a flag. When the swordfish takes the bait, the flag tips. But I don't really know how this process works. So we're out in the boat, we're talking, we're having a good time, and I look at the flag, and the flag's sideways. It's not fully tipped, but it's just sitting diagonal. And I remember, like, some chatter among some of us on the boat, like, hey, is that something? And we both like, hey, like, we reference to the captains, like, is that something going on? And they're very peculiarly, suspiciously not giving us a lot of information. They're like, oh yeah, we see it.
Interesting.
Not saying anything. Finally, like, they start reeling this thing, and line goes tight, swordfish on. We have no idea, like,
wow.
what's. I've never been sword fishing. I don't know this process. I just know that, like, there's a huge electric reel. It's very, very big, very expensive. The buoy and the flag are nowhere in sight anymore. And, like,
wow.
There is clearly something on. So we get this fish finally to the boat. And it's not a really long process, but it's quite the process. Like, this all kind of happens over an hour and a half or so. We see the swordfish, comes to the boat, jumps out. We're like, oh, this is a 400-pound huge fish swinging around the sword off the front of its face. Incredible.
Oh, man. Wow.
So the captain throws a harpoon at it, gets a harpoon in it. Down it goes. And then it comes back, second harpoon in it. We finally get it to the boat. It's like a group effort to pull it into the boat. And then everyone's like body slamming each other and cheering and screaming. We made friendship bracelets out of the like leader. Like,
that's great. That's great.
It was such an incredible experience. But
I can't imagine that. That's cool.
the part that really is important, though, is not necessarily the swordfish. It could have been any fish. It was that, like, it was a team event. It was something that we did together. Like, get the harpoons ready, get this rope out of the way, hold this, steer the boat. And we all come back together, like, having this successful experience. And, like, that, like, solidified the wolf pack. And that's what I love about fishing is you go out with one or two people or a group of people, you have an adventure, and it bonds you for life. Like, you are bonded. You've experienced this together. And I feel like so grateful that I got to have that experience with this group of people. They're my favorites ever. Shout out to the Wolfpack.
Yeah, I love that. And it's cool, like you keep saying, it wasn't just like one person's fish. It sounds like it was the group's fish. So, man, that's cool. I've never even experienced anything remotely similar to that. So just hearing it blows my mind. I can't even imagine how strong the leader must have to be to fight a fish that big. You know, even just down to that little detail is really cool.
Yeah, it was a stellar trip, and I will probably never have that same experience again in my life. And I'm just so grateful that I got to have it with that crew. Those people like hold a special place in my heart forever.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, as we've talked about, you are a guide, and you've been guiding in the Pacific Northwest for some time, and it is currently here on the Willamette, we're starting to see some good spring chinook coming in, and apparently it's only going to get better before it gets worse. And so I was wondering if you would be able to give us any tips for getting after those things here in the Pacific Northwest rivers.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, like springers is not something that I guided for or really encountered a bunch on the Quinault Creeks River. And some other rivers on the peninsula, yes, not very specific to ours. But I have done a bunch of fishing for springers down in the Willamette area. And I will say, on the Columbia, on the Willamette River, whether you're in a boat, a kayak, or you're on one of the bars and plunking for them as they're coming through, figure out the travel lanes of those fish. So one experience that I had, and I learned a lot about springers in this moment. I was at a bar. I forget what the name of it is. Frenchman's Bar or something like that. It's some place on the...
Do you know that bar, Eric?
No.
It's like some spot in the Columbia. There's like a sandy beach. Anyone can drive up to it. And I was plunking. And for those of you who aren't familiar with plunking, you have a big weight. And then off of that, your leader is essentially kind of like a string, maybe one, maybe three different presentations. So maybe you have some coon shrimp with a spin and glow on it. Maybe you have something else. And there's various ways that you can do that. But one of the best things that I did is instead of just going out and throwing it out there and hoping that I have things in front of fish, if you getting it in front of their faces is like more than half the battle, right?
Right.
So I actually rode my kayak out there with a fish finder, and I went and just kind of like worked back and forth, different depths out, from 10 feet all the way up to like, 40, 50 feet. And I was kind of like checking out this drop off of this bank. And I found that I was marking fish only at 30 feet, very specifically at this point. So I found the fish highway, and I took my kayak out there. I dropped my gear right where that should be. And that's how we caught springers that day. And I would say that, like, no matter what type of fishing you're doing, springers, steelhead, coho, figure out the highways that they are traveling in. And you can do that with a fish finder. You can do that by reading water. Where does it make sense that fish are going to move? Where does it make sense? Where does it not make sense? Edit out that water. Focus on the highways. Getting stuff in front of them is so much of the battle.
Yeah, that's been a huge challenge for me as predominantly a bass fisherman who for the last 5 years or so has been attempting to hook up on a salmon. Is learning how to read the river, because bass hang out in different areas than I think the salmon move up the river, at least from what I'm kind of discovering. So when you come up to a river situation, what are some features or water movements? What are things that you're looking for to find a salmon highway?
I love thinking about this in the context of a bass angler and or a salmon angler, because there are very distinct differences on approaches to the water. And I learned this through the One Boat Challenge, and I learned this since I've been living in Northern California, where I have a lot of amazing bass lakes around me and have done a lot more bass fishing. When you approach, say you're a bass angler, when you approach a lake, you're thinking of like water temperature. What time of the year is it? Are these bass moving on to spawning beds? Are they moving off the spawning beds now? What kind of structure am I looking for? Are there pinnacles out in this lake where bass are congregating? Is there downed trees? Like, you're looking for some sort of structure, and you're considering where they might be based off of time of year, water temperature, and other patterning things like that. But when you're considering salmon, there's a very distinct difference in that salmon are not in fresh water all of the time. Actually, for a very small part of their lives are they in fresh water, because as like smelt, they are anadromous. They spend most of their lives out in the ocean and they return back. So if you can think about what the fish is doing with their life, you can learn a lot about the fish. What a salmon is doing with its life, it's trying to conserve energy, and it's trying to get to its spawning grounds. It is not interested in checking out different areas where it's going to spend time and feed. It's not super interested in that. It wants to get to where it's going. It wants to spawn. Then it's going to die, and then it's going to float to the side of the river, and then my dog's going to roll in it. This is the life cycle, right?
Yep.
And so when you're thinking about how to approach salmon fishing, you have to keep that in mind. They want to conserve their energy. They want to get to where they're going. So if you're in a river system, let's say you're in a smaller river and you can see that hey, it's coho season, and the water's maybe it's kind of low, but there's this deep bucket of water right here with a little seam running through it. There's a good chance that your coho are going to be in some of this stiller, froggy water where it's deep, they can stage and then move up to the next section of river. They're trying to conserve their energy. Salmon and generally are very, very lazy. Think typically actually quite lazy. So if you're a salmon and you don't want to spend that much energy to go anywhere, but you have a long way to go, you're not going to just sit at the top of the river in the fastest little piece of water. You're going to sink down low. And this all, of course, depends on water temperature too. But once you kind of get your head wrapped around what they're doing with their lives, you can make a lot of informed decisions about where you're going to find them, which is super different than bass. Salmon will always be on the move. Bass won't always be on the move.
Sure.
So, and you're talking about the salmon moving in stages, so they aren't just 24/7 swimming upstream. Are these periods of rest they're taking, because they're not eating on their journey, right, other than aggression bites, because their digestive systems just shut down. They're at the end of their life. What exactly are they doing in those waiting periods? Why do they have to have them?
Sure, that's a really, really good question. And it changes depending on season, weather, and certainly water volume, which is really important too. So yeah, salmon generally, and steelhead too, generally aren't like coming into the rivers and like thinking, let's eat as much as we can right now. However, they will react to certain scents and other things that indicate like proteins, salts, stuff like that. So they can be a little bit prone to that, but a lot of it's reaction, as you've said. So in low water situations, have you ever, floated like a lower river and like you have a tail out and it's really skinny and it's, maybe a couple inches deep, and then it drops into a section that's like has more water, and then it comes to a bend and it's, shallower again. So as salmon are moving from place to place, they will use some energy to like swim up these shallow spots or to move up, faster water, and then they'll come into slower water again. So, sometimes they like to burn through, but oftentimes what I find in tributary rivers when salmon are first entering, they come in pods. They stay in pods for the first handful of miles of river on fresh water. They'll come into a section of deep water, they'll hold with a tide change sometimes, or if they're, much further above the tide, they will wait. They'll have rested a little bit. They'll move up to the next section, wait, rest, move up to the next section, wait, rest. So you can spend your time in the skinny, really shallow water looking for them, or you can go to the big buckets of like, let's hang out. Like it's like the cafe. They're all hanging out at the cafe. Yeah. They have a good time. They're going to move up to the next section, but they're going to...
If they're not eating, they're just kind of sitting there in one spot. They're not really moving around too much in those pockets, do you think?
So sometimes they can be moving around a fair amount, but generally, like, I can think of the times where I've come up to sections of river where you have a bunch of water and you know there's a ton of salmon there, but you're not seeing a lot of like signs or indicators of them. Generally, like chinook salmon, not all the time, but generally they're not like, surfacing and splashing around. Coho are very different in that sense. They will splash around and rise and that sort of thing. And this can look different river system to river system. And I'm mostly referencing the river systems that I spend the most time in, and that's on the Olympic Peninsula. But generally, you don't see them doing a lot. You kind of have to pay attention to when this run is supposed to be. What season are you in? Are you September, October? Like, should there be a lot of fish in the water? And then your water levels. Does it make sense for them to come into the rivers? Some years, like we've had a lot of like record heat and low water. That's changed the runs a little bit. Salmon aren't going to come into a super hot and super low river if they can avoid it. At some point, they'll go for it because they have to. But generally, they'll wait for higher water before they make that transition.
Got it.
And so they act that way in lower water. Now, in higher water, you've had a big rain event. The river is raging. A lot of times you will see those fish shoot up and get through that high water situation into a situation where they can hold and stay a little bit easier.
So conservation of energy is kind of, or a main thing to think about, specifically when, targeting salmon species. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Like I said, my background's been in salmon fishing and bass fishing, but growing up in Alaska, I've said this to Bryant a million times, it's literally catching. You don't have to work as hard for them. And so when I moved down here and had to really start working for those fish, I've gotten goose egged more on salmon trips here than I ever have anywhere else. But I think a lot of it is just not having the experience growing up here, figuring out the water systems, what they like to do. I mean, the water's quite a bit warmer down here. So there's a lot of different variables. So that's all really good information to think about when we're fishing the river system.
One really popular method that guys do, especially on the Columbia, but even in the Willamette, is trolling.
Yeah.
And I was curious if you have any experience with that.
Yeah, in fact, right before I moved to California, I spent my last handful of days on the Willamette River trolling with my kayak and looking for springers. And I spent a lot of time in Selwood, that area. I had a friend that fished out of that area. John, the Sultan of Selwood, we call him. Okay. And fish for springers on his boat a lot. And trolling, I really enjoy trolling on my kayak. It's a bit more active. I'm pedaling. And I enjoy trolling if I'm in good company. Outside of that, no.
Yeah.
I don't want to troll. I can't do it. I'm too active. I'm too, like, my brain's working too, like I'm pinging all over the place, and just sitting and waiting is like a great way to slowly kill me. Yeah.
And usually pretty cold as well.
Yeah, it's cold, and then like, what do? You sit there, you drink coffee, and you eat donuts, and like, it has its time and its place for me. And I know a lot of the guys like, make their living off of that, and it's really cool for folks to come and like, ride on the boat and like go fishing and trolling around and that sort of thing. But true to the roots, I'm river trotting. I'm trotting through the woods. I'm looking for different stretches of river, and that's what I love the most. And there's really distinct differences between Washington and Alaska too. You're in this area. You're like the Columbia River, as we know it now, is not the Columbia River that it was a couple hundred years ago. It was a much faster river. It was like certainly not dammed up the way that it is now.
Well. And it used to freeze over every year.
Oh,
even up until not that long ago. I think even up until the 50s, it would freeze over every year. Hey everyone, this is Bryant here. Just a quick correction. The Columbia River froze over for the last time in the 1930s, and before that, it wasn't an every year event, but it was kind of common. So there you go.
Oh, that's super interesting.
And that's wild as well to consider that. If it froze over now, imagine the chaos that would ensue. We have no concept of that, but it used to be a every year thing.
Yeah, I like the idea of ice fishing on the Columbia. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, I know. So, talking about your experience trolling on the Willamette, let's say you're going out tomorrow, water level is average. It's not too, right now it's pretty blown out and brown, but let's just pretend that it's going to be a good day fishing. What are you going to be pulling while you're trolling?
360 flasher, probably in white, or that kind of translucent white, 18 inches behind it, a 3.5 inch spinner. Maybe some little prawny on it, maybe not, maybe just running a straight spinner with a little bit of scent, something like that.
Yeah, well, thanks for those tips. I think that's going to be real helpful for a lot of our local fishermen.
Well, now my dad will stop bugging me about salmon. He's just getting into salmon fishing on the rivers. He's retired, and we'll talk a couple times a week sometimes, and he's like, well, what do you know about this section of river, and what about this lure? And I'm just like, hey man, that's not my deal, but we are going to have a guest that definitely try and help you out.
I would say the 360 flasher, the 3.5 inch spinner, this is nothing new, right? Like, this is literally what everybody is running out there. But what I will say is playing with speed and playing with depth, there really isn't a one size fits all. There's like a general, go like a mile and a half an hour, or whatever. Keep your stuff just off the bottom. That generally will put you in a dangerous mode, dangerous enough to catch a fish. But there's really, and I've seen this a lot, and from the guides who spend all of their time out there, playing with that depth and that speed is really the key. Sometimes just a little bit slower. If you're marking fish and you're not catching them, try slowing it down a 0.5 mile an hour, speed it up a 0.5 mile an hour. If you're marking fish higher in the water column, bring your stuff up. You don't have to stay on the bottom. There's no rules that say you have to keep your things on the bottom. Try different things because, they're not constant, and they only bite one thing in one way every single season. This changes. And don't be afraid to use something totally different. They've seen a lot of 360 flashers and spinners. So in a sea of only 360 flashers and spinners, be the person that's pulling something totally different. That's totally fine. A killer fish, or, a cut plug or something like that. Try something different.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people having really good luck on the plug cut herring, especially in the Columbia. But then there's lots of regulations. It's hard to interpret. Like, the Columbia is actually closed right now.
Yeah.
Just the Willamette's open. You got to be paying attention to all those if bait's even allowed. But I have heard people doing great with plug cut herring.
That's fantastic. And yeah, some of those cut plugs, from Brad's, you can stuff them with like tuna and stuff like that. Like playing with scents, playing with different things like that. I mean, even if it's not like the hot thing right now, sometimes just difference allows your stuff to stand out. Yeah.
I've actually been seeing a lot of that in bass fishing over the last year. People are starting to juice their baits.
Oh, yeah.
And bait packages are now coming with juice in them.
Yeah, they're flavored baits and scented baits. Yeah.
So, yeah, I've seen guys dipping, craws and all sorts of stuff in that scent, and then boom.
I have a funny story with that. So when I was a teenager, I have my whole tackle box all organized and everything, and I was looking at some plastics and it says infused with salt, and I got to asking around, and I realized, people were saying, yeah, the salt, the bass like the salt. So I got the good idea. I'll just salt my whole tackle box. And I put salt in all the little compartments and just salt. I opened it up the next week, and everything was toast. It was just corroded, rusted up. I had to start from ground zero. So the scents are great, but don't go overkill covering your whole tackle box in it.
That is so funny. Yeah. The many ways we learn how to be anglers.
Yep, that's exactly right. It was a lesson learned, and now I know why you're not supposed to buy a car from the Midwest.
Pre-salted. Yeah.
So we wanted to ask you just a few more questions. I know that we can't be here all night long, even though I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges you've experienced as a female in a male-dominated profession like guiding?
Oof, boy. What a loaded question.
Yeah.
I think in different stages of my career, I would have answered this in many different ways. And I think the way I would have answered it in 2015 is I don't see myself anywhere. I don't see women anywhere in this sport. I go in to buy gear. There's no gear for women, or shrink it and pink it, and then it's fishing gear for women. And so at that point, I felt like there was just no space. And that has changed profoundly over the last 8 years or so. But still, I would say the challenge is in a space that is mostly male dominated, it is difficult for the industry to kind of get their head wrapped around the different priorities and the different motivations of women anglers. And not to say that they're all are always different than men. This is a very big generalization. But in some of the research that I've read from the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation, and in my experience with other women and men and women in the outdoors, is when I'm with women, we really like to enjoy the experience much more socially than some of our male counterparts. And men do too. That's not to say that they don't. But I remember this really interesting trip. It was in Seattle, and I was fishing with cut plug charters up in the Puget Sound area. I think we were just off of Fox Island. We were fishing for salmon. It was in June of last year. It was a handful of women that were coming on a media event. It was myself. Some of them had prior angling experience. Some of them didn't. We all get on this boat, and we want to talk to each other, and we want to have a good time. We want to listen to music. We want to drop our baits down. We want to get dirty with things and enjoy the experience the same. As I looked out at all of the other boats in this area, there were so many boats that were just one single dude in it, or two dudes in it, but mostly just one single dude out in there. And I think sometimes that is very much there's guides that have full boats and that sort of thing, but there's often a lot of just dudes out there by themselves in their boats, which is totally cool. People like to go and have an individual experience. Sometimes the solitude of fishing is the best part of fishing. But in general, I find that a lot of my female angling peers really like to enjoy this as a social event and want to enjoy it at the speed, at the pace, and the way that we want to do it. And in an industry that kind of caters to certain methods and certain ways of showing up in the outdoors, sometimes I feel a sense of I don't belong here. I don't feel that really anymore like I felt it at one time, but I really like to see other women represented in marketing. I like to go into fishing stores and see things that are very clearly made for women who are really invested in the sport, that isn't just a lesser version of the men's waders or a pink version of the men's waders. Not that there's a bunch of pink waders out there.
Well, salmon like pink.
I mean, this is the thing. Steelhead like pink. I had steelhead pink hair for a year before I dyed it back brown, and it was super fun. And I will say that the industry is really looking at how to include women, but sometimes they do that with boardrooms of men who are talking about what should we do to include women. The answer is get women in the boardrooms. The answer is ask women what they want in the outdoor industry and in fishing. They will tell you the answers. answers. And so I say include women in important leadership roles, ask them these questions as you guys are right now. Like, this is how we move the needle and make it feel more welcoming and exclusive for women. For me, it was never an option. I was going to be a part of this industry. Don't care if they wanted me or not. I was going to do it. But if you didn't grow up the way that I grew up, and maybe you want to try it, it can feel really intimidating to go and get started. And you talk about your experience just getting into salmon. You're already an angler. It can feel a little bit intimidating or a little bit of like a hurdle. Imagine not having any experience at all, having no one to mentor you whatsoever. Like, your experience is going into the tackle shop and asking questions. If you're a woman, that experience can look really, really odd at times. And so I think we're moving the needle in the right direction, but boy, I love seeing more women's voices out there. Yeah.
No, and that's great. I think I've seen an effort, at least, and maybe this is only really on the media side of outdoor space media, is trying to get more women engaged, or at least make it look like there's more women engaged with hunting and fishing. I don't really know if I've seen the fruit of that yet, because when I go to a lake, it's really a bunch of dudes, and maybe a few of their wives are there. So it's interesting hearing your perspective on that, and what do you think will be the thing that gets more women engaged in the outdoors?
I think the thing that gets women more engaged in the outdoors is ensuring that, and it's from men. So I think men have a big role in this, but also women do too. But it's really bringing women into the space to have a say. So like when I mentioned women in the boardrooms making decisions behind what women want, women are going to tell you what they want much better than a man's going to tell you what a woman wants. You mentioned that you're married. You know this, right? You know this. And so I think the way that we're going to continue to move the needle is to bring more women into these spaces and really listen to what they're saying. And you nailed it right on the head. You said that sometimes groups make it look like there's a lot of women. There is a performative aspect that does happen, that, companies just bring in women because they're women and try to promote them. And I get that the intention is going in the right place. But if we really want to see women in this industry, if we want to bring them in and then we want to keep them there, I think what we have to do is authentically hear what it is that they want, bring them in spaces where they are telling the industry what they want and the industry is responding to that. And then outside of that, there's layers. It's not just women, right? I would say that if you were coming into social media right now and you wanted to have a platform as a woman, if you were a younger woman, you're going to fare better than a much older woman. There's an ageism that comes with this. This comes with age. This comes with race. This comes with lots of different layers of experiences in the outdoors. And so I think bringing different people, bringing a diverse group of people, really hearing and listening to what they want, and then doing it without just a dollar sign in mind is how we're going to turn the ship. It's going to happen, but it's going to happen very slowly, but it is going to happen.
And do you feel like your platforms are a way that you've helped? Is that a goal of yours, is to help women feel comfortable in the outdoors?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that there is a necessity to having women. I'm going to take it a step further here right now. Not only is it important to have women in the outdoors, but the future of this industry rests on the women who are raising other women and raising other young men who are going to be a part of this industry too. The very life, the very heartbeat of fishing as a recreation, as a life way, as a sport, rests on the mothers who are bringing them out fishing, on the mothers who are creating an environment where engaging in the outdoors is something that their kids are doing. This is what it really is all about. Not only do we want women, we actually need women as a part of this industry to see it through into the future. Men can't carry it. Sorry, guys.
Just being in the industry a little bit myself, you look at the pro staff teams and stuff like that, 99% of them are full of men.
Oh, yeah.
You don't see any females on FLW, MLF, Bass. Once in a while you go to a local club event or, a bigger tournament, and you'll see some women there, but it's kind of few and far between. So not only are you a great brand ambassador, but I think you're a great ambassador for the sport to bring other women out and, kind of share your knowledge. And I mean, you have a great YouTube channel, a great following.
Thank you.
Both on social media. It's
Thank you.
almost 30,000 on Instagram alone.
And you're better at fishing than most dudes.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah. And that's super awesome. I don't know very many females that are like, hey, let's go fishing. Let's go kill them,
And so I'm trying to kind of synthesize what you were saying about how without women, the outdoor industry will die. And that makes me think of politics and policy.
Yeah.
Partially, because if we're only marketing toward men, and really if the only people who are engaged with hunting and fishing are older men, which the average age of people who own hunting license goes up a year every year in the United States, then eventually not only is, so men only, that's only 50% of the population. Older men only, that's even less and less every year because, everyone dies eventually.
Yeah.
Or gets too old to participate. So that, I mean, in my mind, even just that simple reality of voting and helping people to understand what life in the outdoors really is and the role that it can play in everyone's life and should play in everyone's life. I think just even that simple fact validates everything that you're saying right now, but there's even more to it than that.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, fishing isn't just about going and catching a fish and then going home. For a lot of people, fishing is about going and getting a fish, bringing it home, cooking it, sharing it with your family. Yeah. Whether women were out fishing on that boat that day that fish was caught or not, they're a part of the process that gets it home on the table. Maybe they're cooking it, preparing it, something like that. And this, can go either way, men or women. But generally, women are still involved in this process, whether we see it or not. And I think it's important to really, bolster that, encourage that. You can have a part in fishing without ever having a rod in your hand. And there's no wrong way to enjoy this unless you have dynamite. That is wrong. Outside of that, there's no wrong way to do this.
Or poison, maybe?
Right.
Okay, let's think of a bunch of wrong things.
Right. Dynamite, making your own dams.
Anyway, I think that's really awesome. And you mentioned, too, that there's more to this outdoor experience than just what it is on the surface of collecting food. That's one thing that is kind of foundational to what we're doing here with the podcast, is this reality that people have grown so separate from where their food comes from. And the analogy I've said before is like when you microwave a Hot Pocket, you don't think about the fact that the grain was grown in a field. The meat comes from an animal. The cheese comes from an animal. The tomatoes for the sauce, that's grown on a farm, and how we are 100% dependent on the land for our food. Whether you are skipping the middleman and going and getting it yourself, or you're going to the grocery store and buying frozen food. I mean, sure, there's some ground in the middle there, but two extremes. With that basic connection with the land, it sounds like that concept also resonates with you and sort of what you want to express through your influence in the outdoor sphere.
Yeah, I think there's two important elements to that to me. One, Richard White, he wrote that. I'm also a doctoral student of history at the University of California, so I'm about to talk about some nerd stuff right now.
All right.
Right. Sounds good.
Richard White wrote a book that everyone in the Northwest should read. It's called The Organic Machine, and it is a book about the Columbia River. But he talks about what is natural about dams and what is unnatural about salmon. And that seems really backwards, right? But there's a natural aspect to us wanting to create power and, generate, things that sustain our lives. That's a natural thing. But are the chemicals in the salmon's body, does that seem natural? We tend to think of nature as something that's out there, like we're inside and that's not nature, but nature is out there. And that's really a misconception. Like we are always a part of nature. Nature is everywhere, and everything. And so the idea of a dam, that is human nature to involve ourselves in our resources. And maybe there's something that seems less natural about hatchery produced salmon, or the chemicals that, unfortunately are like accumulated in the salmon body or something like that. And so I just really like to get people to think about nature and our involvement with it a little bit differently. We're more entangled with it than we like to think about ourselves. We need to stop thinking about ourselves as outside. We are always a part of an ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I think the other like really important element to me is I mentioned earlier on in the podcast that I'm a 142nd generation angler. And this is where the spiritual piece really comes in for me. Like I said, I'm a historian, and we all kind of have like different levels of what we understand of our history. But this is not a discovered land that we're on. This is indigenous land that was colonized by Europeans. And for a very, very long time, and one that continues on today, there is a profound relationship that indigenous people have with their ecosystems. And like, I know that myself, my family, other indigenous people are the realized dreams of their ancestors that made a lot of hard concessions to ensure the future of their people. And so between these two things, between the continuity of the resource itself, of understanding that we are a part and we have a profound impact on our resources, and we should think about our involvement in that, and that being here and storytelling, being a member of my tribe is by no accident, that these two things have happened. And to me, like, this is a big part of my identity, but this is essentially my purpose and why it is I do what I do. It is for these two things.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's said so beautifully, put so perfectly.
Thank you.
Really, especially bringing, and say the name of that book again.
It's The Organic Machine by Richard White.
Okay. And thanks for bringing that perspective on how your connection with the outdoors goes beyond physically yourself, but it sort of supersedes that into a spiritual reality that's part of your culture and who you are as a human being, and how I would argue everyone needs to tap into that aspect of who they are as a human being, a creature that came from this land that still is a part of this land.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think we've had a great conversation tonight. Really appreciated you taking the time, and that our schedules lined up and everything worked out for this to happen. Could you please tell us a few things? We want to know what kind of stuff you're working on, where we can follow you, and if anyone wants to hire you as a guide, where can we find any of that kind of information?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm on all platforms at Badash Outdoors. And right now, as I kind of briefly mentioned, I'm working on my PhD in history at the University of California. For the next several months, for the next 3 months, I will be wrapping the courses portion of that. I intend to be much more present in the Pacific Northwest, where I do plan on running a handful of fishing trips this fall. I probably won't do it a ton or full time, but if anyone is interested, reach out to me, ash@badashfishing.com for email, or on any of the platforms that I mentioned, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Going forward, I'm really, really excited, and I can't say too much yet, but what I can say is I had a production meeting today with a production company, and there's going to be some really exciting things in the television and digital realm coming out in the next year or so. So Badash Outdoors is going to be bouncing all around salmon land. So.
All right. I love it. So, and you said you can't share too much about that yet, but that sounds really exciting. There's a little bit of mystery there. When that comes out, will it be pretty easy to find it as long as we're following you on social media and whatnot?
Yeah. So you will definitely, if you follow along on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube at Badash Outdoors, I will definitely keep everybody posted. And I really am I'm not a very good influencer. Sure. I don't really like to think of people as followers. And I think all of that is actually really weird and an odd dynamic of relating with people. I engage with people in the social media realm as my community and my outdoor family. And so I really do like to keep people posted on what I've got going on in my life. And that's not just a salmon technique and, an inspirational video here and there. I like to wrap history, salmon fishing, sport fishing in general, food, the relationships that we have with our environment. I like to wrap all of these things into what I do, and I share that story through Instagram and Meta platforms.
Awesome. Yeah.
No, we definitely look forward to, having you back up this way and, getting together with you, going for a fishing trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seeing what Badass Outdoors is all about.
We will definitely do it. I love it. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys having me on, and especially like early in what you guys are doing. I really, really appreciate that, we've had a chat today. Anytime I get asked the question like, hey, like, what are you doing? Why does it matter? It reminds me of why it matters. And it matters for moments like this, where we get to connect with other people and share knowledge and hopefully inspire somebody else. So thank you guys for kind of reinvigorating that for me today.
Great. Yeah.
Awesome.
And that's what we're all about. Thank you for taking part, and thanks for this conversation, Ashley.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Oh no, that's the two guys that we saw earlier that were sitting there for a long time not moving. There's an orange thing floating in the river over there. It's like a ball or a pumpkin or something. Great, they're going ripping right up the side of the river.